What do we know about the crime statistics as it relates to immigrants? And that is true both for the ones that come, second generation, legal, illegal, however it can be meaningfully evaluated.
Yeah. So again, this is, I would say, sort of after the idea that immigrants take jobs, the most harped on word about immigrants in our administration is criminals, these criminal aliens, criminal foreigners. This is one where the data is the most unambiguous. So you asked me at the beginning, how confident can we be in the data? This is the one where we are the most confident, right? That is, it's scientifically dishonest to say anything other than immigrants have the lowest crime rate in this country, and undocumented immigrants have the lowest among all immigrants, right? And so it's exactly the opposite of what people think. And there's many ways to look at that. One is you can look at the rate of crime for certain categories. So whether it's violent crime, property crime, drug crime, right? And however you slice the data, whether it's nationally, state by state, what you see is undocumented immigrants have the lowest rate, documented immigrants have the second lowest, and non-immigrants have the highest rate, right? On whatever category of crime you look at. You can also look at what happens to crime in communities when immigrants arrive. Does it go up or down? Overwhelmingly, it just doesn't change, right? Because immigrants are not bringing crime. You could look at incarceration rates. And on this, we have very old data all the way back to the 1800s. And if you look historically, immigrants have always had a lower incarceration rate than non-immigrants, right? And that's even if you break it down by race. And actually, that gap has been widening over time. So since 1960, immigrants have an even lower incarceration rate than non-immigrants. So look, I can slice the data however you want. The conclusion is you are actually safer with immigrants than not, right? Like, if you want to reduce aggregate crime statistics, invite immigrants in rather than the opposite. And someone might be saying, well, why undocumented immigrants? Well, the answer is pretty simple, right? What's the quickest way to get deported is be caught for a crime. So you have a very strong deterrent. I'm not saying that's a reason to keep people undocumented for the other reasons we mentioned earlier, but that's just a lie. Like, so the way I'd put it is that's just a flat out lie, right? And the fact that it's been so effective is beyond me, right? I get it, right? That political ad with the grainy imagery of the undocumented immigrant who murdered someone. I mean, that's powerful, right? That's moving. And that particular story is true, but statistically, it's not true. In fact, it's quite the opposite, right? We should be showing grainy pictures of non-immigrants committing crimes if we want it to be statistically accurate.
Which leads me to the second part of my line of inquiry that I mentioned, which is higher education. And I have a question on sort of two levels. One, you mentioned like when 100 immigrants come to a community, that's a lot to absorb, but of course they're now expanding the pie. It's not just the supply side, the demand side changes. But when you're dealing with college, there is a finite amount of people that Harvard or UVA or Wharton, where you go, will admit. It's a little bit more fixed. So I wonder what you think the appropriate role of immigrants or foreign students who come here, which often there is a direct relationship to them staying. And then, I think your story is exactly that, if I'm not mistaken, right? From higher education, then sort of establishing a life here. And then secondly, as it relates to, it's somewhat separate from H-1B or from higher education, but the H-1B visa issue, in terms of how you believe we don't have enough of them, but there is a debate, certainly on the West Coast and in tech, about where we're just getting them, we're bringing in H-1B visa holders. We were able to keep wages low, and then Elon Musk can fire half of Twitter and then keep these guys there, because if they say no, they have to leave. And so it's a sort of way to police labor. It's a bigger question, but let's start on what the role should be for immigrants inside higher education.
Yeah. So, that's a good question. So the U.S. has educated so many international students, right? I think, I don't quote me on the exact numbers, but something like 1 million per year arrive or something. So at any given point in time, we have about 4 million international students. That, maybe that's a little too high, but anyway, the numbers are pretty large. So yeah, the question, I think you could ask, well, are those immigrants sort of taking the seats of non-immigrants? I don't know that we have really good data on that. I think it's a fair question, because unlike, say, the rest of the economy, where those 100 immigrants arrive and the economic pie can grow, if Penn or Harvard or University of Pennsylvania or Iowa State doesn't increase enrollment, but it is bringing, say, more international students, something's got to give, right? Somebody's not getting in, and so, anything with finite admissions it is more likely to have zero sum. I don't have good numbers on that. The other thing we do know that I can say is that immigrants and non-immigrants kind of sort into different majors. So, for example, immigrants disproportionately go into STEM majors. Um, a lot of non-immigrants, a lot of natives simply are not majoring in engineering, math, science, microbiology. And so, in as much as there's just different preferences for majors, you're going to have less competition. And we are seeing that then on the labor market side, immigrants play a disproportionate role there, and firms are not finding enough non-immigrant workers with those skills. So I don't know if the college enrollment thing is representing the pull of the labor market or something else. So I'm going to refrain from saying too much about that, but I'll concede that, at least in theory, it's possible that if the amount of seats is finite, you could be getting some competition. At the same time, you have to think of the net effect of what welcoming those immigrants are, right? Because if they're disproportionately starting businesses and investing and all that upon graduation, then on average we could still be better off. But again, I don't want to just speculate about that. H-1Bs, okay. So I think let's separate our need for skilled workers, like the ones that are recruited through the H-1B program, and the H-1B program itself. There is no doubt that we desperately have a shortage of people with the kinds of skills that we recruit through the H-1B, right? College educated, particularly with STEM skills, right? In many industries, I'll give AI as an example, right? So in the field of AI in the US, 53% of PhDs in AI are foreign born, right? Without immigrants, we don't have ChatGPT, we don't have Gemini, we don't our AI industry doesn't exist without immigrants. I mean, just look at the founders and top managers of OpenAI and all the satellite companies that have spun out from there. It's kind of a who's who of what country did they come from? And again, these are net job creators, and so the fact that we need these workers is I think that's pretty undeniable. The H-1B program is kind of, as far as temporary paths, temporary workers with those skills, it's the only thing we have. So if the choice is between scrapping the H-1B program and keeping it, we have to keep it. Now, are there ways that we can improve the design of the program? For sure, right? One of the weaknesses of the program is that the employer completely controls the visa of that worker, right? And so H-1B workers, I mean, in principle, they can move jobs, but it's very complicated. So often they're kind of stuck with that employer, especially if that employer sponsors them for a green card. Then they can stay on the H-1B until they get the green card, but that might be a decade in which they're kind of stuck with that employer. So I would love for more flexibility that allows for the workers to move. Now, the one thing that the evidence debunks is the companies use the H-1B visa to lowball on wages, right? There's been studies done on this. One of them that's very good shows that, that firms don't recruit H-1B workers until they have exhausted the possibility of hiring someone in the native labor market. They're not required to do so, but so basically the likelihood of filling a position with an H-1B worker is higher the longer the job has been posted but not filled. And also, actually, it's higher as the wage increases, right? So firms are required to pay sort of a minimum, but the firms that get more H-1B workers actually pay way above that. So that kind of debunks the idea that this is just like shortchanging sort of native tech workers. Again, there could be evidence that comes out to contradict that, but so far the evidence we have doesn't show that.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. Please consider giving this a thumbs up as well as liking it. And if you want more of my politics coverage, go to the link in the description box for my Substack. Yes, go to my Substack. We might put a QR code on the screen here as well. Tons of exclusives, interviews, chat functionality with a whole different community over there. Tons of fun stuff. Give it a look.